There are some places in the world where the landscape itself feels hostile. Not in an obvious way, not like a desert or a jungle or some frozen wasteland from a movie, but in a quieter, more patient way. The kind of place where the wind never seems to stop, where the sky always looks heavy, where the silence feels like it's pressing in on you from every direction. The northern Ural Mountains in Russia are just like that. In the winter, they become a place almost no one wants to be. The temperatures drop far below zero. The wind cuts through layers of clothing like it isn't even there. And the snow doesn't just sit on the ground, it moves. It drifts, it builds, it hides the landscape beneath a soft, deceptive surface. In late January of 1959, 9 experienced hikers set out into these mountains. Strap in, passenger. Make sure your seatbelt is on tight. We're taking a hike into the Russian mountains tonight. They weren't amateurs. They were young, capable, highly trained outdoor enthusiasts. Most of them were students or graduates from the Ural Polytechnic Institute. They had experience with winter expeditions, difficult terrain, and brutal weather. The trip they were planning was considered challenging, but not impossible. The group was led by a 23-year-old engineering student named Igor Dyatlov. He was serious, organized, and respected by the others. The kind of person people trusted when things got difficult. There were 10 hikers at the start of the journey, but early on, one of them, a man named Yuri Yudin, began feeling sick. He turned back before the group reached the deep wilderness. This was a decision that ultimately saved his life. The remaining 9 continued into the mountains. They moved slowly through the snow, hauling their gear across the frozen terrain. Their plan was simple: reach a certain point in the mountains, camp for the night, and continue the trek the next day. But something went wrong. Very wrong. On February 1st, 1959, the group set up their tent on the slope of a mountain known locally as Kholat Syakal, and I apologize if I'm butchering that pronunciation, which I probably am. In the language of the indigenous Mansi people, that name means something chilling. Mountain of the Dead. Not exactly the most welcoming place. It wasn't named that because of the hikers. It had carried that name long before they ever arrived. The slope was exposed, windy, not an ideal place to camp. But for reasons no one fully understands, Dyatlov and the others pitched their tent there anyway, cutting into the snow to create a flat surface. This was the last time they were ever seen alive. When the hikers didn't return on schedule, a search party was eventually sent out. At first, there wasn't much concern. Delays were common in harsh conditions. But as the days turned into weeks, worry began to grow. Finally, on February 26th, searchers found the campsite, and nothing about it made sense. The tent was still standing, but it had been cut open from the inside. Not unzipped, not torn by the wind. Sliced open, as if the people inside had needed to escape immediately and panicked. Inside the tent were their boots, their heavy winter coats, their crucial supplies, everything they would have needed to survive the freezing night. but the hikers themselves were gone. Footprints led away from the tent, down the slope into the pitch darkness. The tracks showed that the group had left on foot, some barefoot, some wearing only socks, others in a single boot. It was clear they were in a hurry. The temperature that night was estimated at being around -20 to -30 degrees Celsius. To be clear, that is cold enough to kill a person in minutes. The footprints continued for about a mile, leading to the edge of a forest. There, beneath a large cedar tree, searchers found the first 2 bodies. They were lying side by side, dressed only in their underwear. Their hands were covered in burns and scrapes, as if they had tried to climb the tree, or perhaps tried to build a fire and gotten too close to the flames. Not far from them, 3 more bodies were found. One of them was Igor Dyatlov himself. They were positioned as if they had been trying to make their way back to the tent, as if they had fled in terror and then tried to return once the danger, whatever it was, had passed. But they never made it. The remaining 4 hikers were not found until months later, when the snow finally began to melt. And what searchers discovered then turned the mystery into something far more disturbing, if you can believe it. These 4 bodies were found in a ravine under several feet of snow. Unlike the others, they were partially dressed in clothing taken from their dead companions, which meant they had survived longer. But their injuries were more horrific. One woman had multiple broken ribs. Another hiker had a crushed skull. One man had such severe chest trauma that investigators said it was comparable to injuries from a high-speed car crash. And yet, believe it or not, there were no external wounds. No deep cuts, no signs of a violent struggle, just massive internal damage, as if an overwhelming force had been applied to their bodies. The most disturbing detail came from one of the female hikers. Her tongue was missing. So were her eyes. At first, authorities assumed it was the result of scavenging animals, but for many, it only added to the growing unease surrounding the case. The official investigation concluded with a vague, unsatisfying statement. The hikers, they said, had died because of a compelling natural force. Interesting wording there. No further explanation was given, and that was it. Case closed. But people couldn't accept that answer, because it didn't answer anything at all. Over the decades, theories poured in from every direction. Some said it was an avalanche, but the slope wasn't steep enough, and the tent wasn't buried. Others suggested infrasound, low-frequency vibrations caused by wind over the mountain, which could supposedly induce panic or irrational behavior, but that didn't explain the bizarre injuries. There were rumors of secret military tests, experimental weapons, radiation exposure. In fact, some of the hikers' clothing was later found to have traces of radiation on it. But again, no clear explanation. And then there are the stranger theories. Creatures in the mountains, unknown predators, even extraterrestrial involvement. Were they abducted? Would that account for the bizarre injuries? When a story refuses to make sense, the human mind starts reaching for anything that might fill the gap. But the most haunting part of the Dyatlov Pass incident isn't the injuries. It isn't the missing tongue. It isn't even the mystery itself. It's that moment inside the tent. 9 experienced hikers in the middle of a frozen mountain suddenly decide to cut their way out of their shelter and run into the darkness barely dressed, in temperatures that would kill them within minutes. And did. They didn't take their boots, they didn't take their coats, they didn't even use the entrance. They just ran. Whatever scared them that night, it scared them more than freezing to death, more than the dark, more than the mountain itself. And that's the part that still lingers. What could make 9 strong, experienced hikers abandon their only shelter in the middle of a deadly winter night? What exactly did they see? And what was waiting for them out there in the cold? Some mysteries fade with time. Evidence disappears. Witnesses pass away. Stories become legends. But Dyatlov Pass remains frozen in time. 9 hikers, 1 mountain, 1 massive, unsolved murder mystery, and a night no one can explain. Thanks for listening, pal. I'll catch you on the next drive.